Thanks for joining us for Baptist Press This Week. I'm Brandon Porter. In this episode of Baptist Press This Week, we're going to be joined by Jason Thomas. He works with the International Mission Board. Specifically, he helps African American churches with missions and mobilization. He'll be talking to us about George Liele, the work and the ministry of this pioneer missionary. Join us for an exciting opportunity to learn about God's faithfulness through the work of George Liele. Jason, thanks so much for joining us for Baptist Press this week. We're glad that you're here on the program.
Yep, good to be here.
Yeah. So folks may not know you in your role at the IMB. Tell us a little bit about who you are, about your role there at IMB.
And so, I serve as the African American Church Mobilization Strategist here with the International Mission Board. And I know you can't say that three times fast. My role is kind of connecting our African American Black churches to the work that we're doing. And that's it's a couple of things that we kind of do. We train, we help to mobilize, and so we connect them to our missionary units on the mission field, and we also we serve. And so, whatever capacity they need, for us, we'll participate in missions conferences. We provide breakout sessions for them, and of course, on resources that we have here at the International Mission Board and training resources on short-term mission trips. We provide that for our churches.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you for doing that. That's great. One of the things that we want to talk to you about in this program is the Emphasis Sunday that we have on the Southern Baptist calendar to mark, to celebrate, to remember the work of George Liele. And so some folks may not know who he is. Would you just give us an introduction as to who is George Liele?
Oh, of course. So George Liele is actually one of the first African American Baptists who was ordained. He is the founder of the first African Baptist Church in Savannah, Georgia, which actually is still in existence today. And he later became the first missionary to leave America to take the gospel to Jamaica. And we know of William Carey, who's said to be the father of modern missions. But George Liele actually took the gospel to Jamaica a full 10 years before William Carey did.
Yeah. What were some of the things that the Lord accomplished through George Liele's work there in Jamaica and just in a broader context as well?
Yeah, this great question. And so Liele primarily preached among the slaves. He was later freed by his master. And so many came to faith through his preaching. The early Black Baptists here in America, a good number of our founding churches, the pastors were discipled by George Liele. Then later in 1814, George Liele arrived in Jamaica. And there are about 8,000 Baptists that included the slaves, freedmen, and some whites. But by 1832, as a result of Liele's ministry, there were more than 20,000 believers there.
Wow, that's amazing. So let me ask a different question. Sometimes when I read biographies, autobiographies, or hear lectures on missionaries, sometimes I learn as much from their suffering as I do from their accomplishments, if that makes sense.
Yes.
What are some things, what were some hardships that George Liele faced and how he was faithful through those, how he struggled with those, how he saw the Lord's hand at work in those situations?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. So George Liele, because you look at the timing, he actually was a pastor, evangelist, missionary pre 1776. And so some of those hardships meant that he was freed by his master, who actually ordained him into the gospel ministry. But after his master died, the family actually tried to re-enslave him, which was what actually catapulted him into ministry outside of the United States. And so, and even when he was in Jamaica, everything didn't go as well as they should or they would, as you know, when you do anything for God. So George Liele in Jamaica was persecuted. He was in prison. And because of his work of portraying the gospel amongst the churches there and helping them to understand who God is and who God had created them to be. He didn't necessarily advocate for any slave revolts or anything like that. But because churches were being formed and suspicions were being made, he was jailed for a number of years.
Hmm. Well, that's a little bit of the background of George Liele. We really appreciate you
Yes.
painting that picture for us. When we come back, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we want to think about specifically the Emphasis Sunday that's coming up in early 2023 and how churches can utilize that. What are some resources, things like that. So stay with us, and we'll be back with more on Baptist Press this week.
A decade ago, more than 7,800 messengers joined in unison in New Orleans to elect Fred Luter as president of our convention.
Fire-breathing, miracle-working pastor of Franklin Avenue Baptist Church, Pastor Fred Luter.
It is my privilege to declare Fred Luter the new president of the Southern Baptist Convention.
To God be the glory for the things that he has done. God bless you. I love you.
In June, messengers from across the country will once again come together on the bayou to celebrate how God is using us to carry out the Great Commission. New Orleans is truly a unique city, boasting one of the greatest culinary experiences in America. The city is rich in history, tradition, and Great Commission partnerships. Join us in New Orleans on June 11th through 14th for the 2023 Annual Meeting and Pastors Conference. Let's celebrate how God is working in and through churches across the U.S. and around the world to accomplish the Great Commission.
Thanks for joining us for Baptist Press this week. Our guest is Jason Thomas with the International Mission Board, and we're talking about the Emphasis Sunday that Southern Baptists have set aside to commemorate the work of George Liele, to focus on missions, on church planting. Those things were very important in his life, and the Lord used him in a great way. Jason, as you think about an Emphasis Sunday aimed in that direction, what do you hope churches will get out of focusing on George Liele and the work God accomplished through him?
Yeah, well, the creation of this George Liele Emphasis Sunday was one of partnerships between the National African American Fellowship and the International Mission Board. And so just at the beginning of the emphasis, there was teamwork and there was partnership. And one of the things I think that churches can learn is that even though George Liele had great adversity, he never let that subvert him from building God's kingdom. And so our churches can learn so much from his examples because we're facing barriers of our own. And we need to kind of look towards that example to not allow that to distract us of fulfilling the goal of the Great Commission, keeping our eyes fixed on God's kingdom.
What are some resources available to churches to help them on this Emphasis Day?
So the International Mission Board has developed downloadable resources. We have videos, we have church bulletins, a prayer guide, an activity sheet for children and their families. And these resources will help to plan the recognition of that work and leadership of the different African-American Southern Baptist missionaries that we have. We also hope that this will encourage churches to send African-American and Black missionaries to the nations through IMB. These will be available January 2023. And you can find those resources on our website at imb.org/Black Church Missions.
Okay, very good. What are some of the challenges, maybe some unique challenges that African-American churches face when it comes to missions and mobilization?
Yes. So traditionally, we see that there's some challenges and some different ones in the African-American context, and some are similar to other smaller churches. One is that the community has often prioritized the needs of our local communities over international concerns, the things that are directly in our face. And so that has been a hindrance of sorts to doing anything outside of the local community. There's also been most of your racial minorities are not as exposed to global travel. And so that affects actually having the concern for the nations. And that's why, we want to build in this idea of us giving going and praying for those nations so that they're more cognizant in our minds. And of course, there is a tainted history of missions and colonialism. And that backs up against the backdrop of our racial history in our country, which has contributed to suspicion of organizations that are predominantly Anglo, which are most, if not all, of our missions organizations out there. But one of the things I'm seeing, and many of you probably would hear, and we did a study earlier last year called The Future of Missions with Barna and IMB. We see younger generations having much more zeal for international missions. And we also see a lot of the younger people wanting to do what they're feeling called to do in support or without the church. And so what we're going to need is a lot of our churches to have a relationship with this next generation that's coming up, because most of our African-American churches don't have those younger leaders as in leadership as pastors. So
yeah, that's helpful. That's really good. I want to ask you if it's okay. I'm going to maybe put you on the spot just a little bit.
Okay,
you shared before. You shared before we started the interview, or we're rolling tape, that you've been with the IMB around 3 years.
Yes.
I wonder if you'd share maybe some things that the Lord has taught you in these 3 years since you've been serving with the IMB.
Yeah. So I'll back it up just a bit, and then I'll go into that. So prior to serving with the International Mission Board, I served as a Baptist collegiate minister or a college minister.
Okay.
I was a BCM director at a historically Black college university. And that allowed me to be able to take students and give them a vision of Acts 1:8, of their being with their Judea, Samaria, and othermost parts of the world. And so working in the capacity here at the International Mission Board has allowed me to be able to, one, learn much about our history. I'd heard and known about George Liele as a church planter, but a lot of his missionary exploits were not necessarily fully known. And what's happening also as a result of this role, I'm unearthing and seeing also a rich history with African Americans within the International Mission Board, or prior to that name, the Foreign Mission Board. And so it's just that God is faithful. Oftentimes, it's not big, bold, flashy, but he has been faithful to have those representations of the pioneers of the faith right there for every ethnic to have an example from.
Yeah, that's so helpful. Thank you for letting me put you on the spot there.
No problem.
Very encouraging. Yeah, very, very helpful. Anything else that you would share as you think about this special day on our SBC calendar?
Yeah, one of the things that it just reminds me of is how, oftentimes our president, Dr. Paul Chitwood, says that God's given this vision to the church, this express vision of Revelation 7:9, a multitude of every language, people, and tribe and nation. And that means that as a Southern Baptist Convention, and as we see our convention becoming increasingly more diverse, that we need every church to be represented, to be obedient, to have the capacity to work alongside one another, so that we might see the nations reached for him. And of course, we need a heart for the lostness in the world. And if we have that heart, then we're going to have to look out towards those nations as well.
Yeah, that's really helpful. We sure appreciate your time here on Baptist Press this week.
No, thank you.
Thanks for joining us for Baptist Press this week. We hope the conversation has been helpful today. Of course, the topics that we've talked about in this episode are things that we write stories about every day at Baptist Press. Once you visit us at baptistpress.com, while you're there, make sure to sign up for our morning and afternoon emails. Thanks for watching Baptist Press this week.